For centuries, religion has shaped civilizations, guided morals, and provided comfort in times of struggle. Yet, within this vast spiritual tradition lies a web of myths, half-truths, and outright fabrications that people still cling to today. These so-called holy lies have been repeated so often that they've become accepted as fact, even though history, archaeology, and logic often prove otherwise. In this video, we're peeling back the layers of dogma and tradition to reveal 5 major religious myths that continue to influence millions of people. Get ready to challenge what you thought you knew about faith, history, and belief. One of the most widely accepted myths is that sacred texts, whether the Bible, the Quran, or others, have remained unchanged since their divine revelation. Believers are often told that every word is exactly as it was when first delivered. But historical evidence tells another story. Countless translations, interpretations, and even deliberate edits have shaped these texts over time. For example, the Bible alone has gone through centuries of canonization debates, missing gospels, and language shifts that alter meaning. Words in ancient Hebrew or Greek rarely translate perfectly into English, meaning nuance is lost or distorted. The idea of a flawless, untouched scripture isn't reality. It's an illusion created to preserve authority. Recognizing this doesn't diminish the wisdom within these texts, but it does remind us that what we read today is a product of human decisions, not untouched divine dictation. Many religions promote the idea of eternal reward or punishment after death. Heaven is depicted as paradise, while hell is painted as eternal torment. But are these places real, physical locations? Historically, these concepts evolved over centuries. Ancient Judaism had little concept of hell as we know it today. Instead, it described Sheol, a shadowy resting place for the dead. The fiery pits of hell were later influenced by Greco-Roman mythology and medieval imagination. Dante's Inferno popularized much of our modern imagery of torture and flames. Similarly, heaven shifted from being a metaphor for closeness to God into a literal kingdom above the clouds. These myths have been powerful tools for controlling behavior, rewarding obedience with paradise and punishing disobedience with eternal suffering. But when we look deeper, they're more symbolic than factual. The story of a virgin birth is central to Christianity, but it isn't unique. Long before the gospel accounts, ancient cultures told similar tales of gods or heroes born miraculously. Figures like Horus in Egypt, Mithras in Persia, and even Greek legends of divine births mirror the narrative. Scholars point out that mistranslations may have played a role. The Hebrew word alma, meaning young woman, was later translated into Greek as parthenos, meaning virgin. This small shift fueled one of the most significant theological claims in Christianity. The virgin birth myth provided a way to set Jesus apart, elevating him above mere humanity. While the story inspires faith, it's rooted more in mythological tradition and linguistic evolution than in historical fact. Another powerful myth is the idea that only one religion holds the absolute truth. This belief has fueled wars, division, and intolerance for centuries. But when we examine history, we find that every culture developed its own spiritual framework, often with striking similarities. Flood myths, resurrection stories, and moral codes appear across civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica. Are we to believe that billions of people who followed different paths were all wrong? The myth of one true religion creates exclusivity, shutting the door on spiritual diversity. Instead, it's more accurate to see religions as different languages, expressing the same human longing for connection with the divine. No single tradition has a monopoly on truth. Many people believe religion has only served humanity's highest good, but history reveals a more complex picture. Yes, faith has inspired art, music, compassion, and charity, but it has also justified crusades, inquisitions, witch hunts, and oppression. Leaders have often manipulated religious belief to maintain power or control populations. Myths like divine right allowed kings to rule unchallenged, while religious approval was used to silence dissent. The notion that religion is always holy blinds us to the harm done in its name. Recognizing the darker side of faith doesn't erase the good. It simply offers a fuller, more honest perspective. True spirituality should liberate, not dominate. Many people are taught that prayer works like a transaction. Ask God for something, and if you're worthy, you'll receive it. But life doesn't reflect that pattern. People pray fervently for healing, safety, or success, yet tragedy often still strikes. This doesn't mean prayer is meaningless. It means we've misunderstood its role. In its deeper essence, prayer was never about controlling the universe or bending God's will. Ancient mystics saw prayer as a form of alignment, a practice to tune one's spirit to higher wisdom, not to order blessings like items on a menu. The myth of prayer as a vending machine sets people up for disappointment when prayers aren't answered. Instead of demanding outcomes, prayer can serve as a meditative practice that cultivates inner peace, resilience, and connection. It transforms you, not the external world. The holy lie here is the promise of guaranteed results, when in reality, prayer is a conversation, not a contract. The doctrine of original sin teaches that humanity is inherently corrupted because of Adam and Eve's disobedience in Eden. This myth suggests that every human being is born guilty, stained, and in need of redemption. Yet, when we trace the history, we discover that this doctrine was not universally accepted in early Christianity. It was shaped largely by Augustine in the 4th century, who tied sexuality, guilt, and inherited sin together. Many ancient traditions, both within and outside Christianity, viewed humans not as fallen creatures, but as beings with divine potential. The myth of original sin has been used for centuries to instill guilt and dependency on religious authority. Imagine the difference. Instead of believing you were born broken, what if you believed you were born whole, carrying within you a spark of the divine? The lie of original sin diminishes human dignity, while its unraveling reveals a deeper truth, that we are not inherently damned, but inherently capable of love and growth. For generations, people have been taught to fear God as an angry ruler watching every move, ready to punish. Fire, brimstone, plagues, and eternal damnation. These are the images drilled into the collective psyche. But when we study sacred texts closely, we find another side, God as compassionate, merciful, forgiving. So why does the wrathful version dominate? Because fear is a powerful tool of control. By keeping people terrified of divine punishment, religious leaders ensured obedience. But the myth of an always angry God doesn't align with deeper spiritual teachings. In mysticism, God is often described not as a judge, but as an ocean of love and consciousness. When we see the divine as pure wrath, we shrink in fear. When we see the divine as infinite love, we expand into our true potential. The myth of a wrathful God keeps humanity enslaved to fear, while the truth liberates us into trust and spiritual freedom. A common teaching is that faith, by itself, guarantees salvation. Simply believing in the right creed, reciting the right prayer, or joining the right group is said to secure one's eternal destiny. But is faith alone truly enough? Across traditions, wisdom teachers emphasized action, compassion, and transformation, not just belief. In Christianity, Jesus often said, "By their fruits you shall know them," highlighting that what you do matters as much as what you believe. Buddhism teaches the Eightfold Path, focusing on ethical living, not blind faith. The myth that mere belief equals salvation reduces spirituality to lip service. True transformation requires inner and outer work, cultivating virtues, embodying compassion, and living consciously. Faith without action is like planting seeds but never watering them. The lie of faith alone provides false security, while the truth invites deeper responsibility in how we live. Doubt is often painted as the enemy of faith. Believers are told that questioning means they lack trust, that skepticism is sinful, and that only blind obedience pleases God. Yet, throughout history, doubt has been the seed of deeper understanding. Thinkers, mystics, and prophets questioned tradition, challenged authority, and pushed beyond inherited dogma. Without doubt, there would be no growth. Blind faith leaves people vulnerable to manipulation, while healthy doubt strengthens discernment. Even within scriptures, figures like Job wrestled with God, expressing confusion and frustration. The myth that doubt equals weakness silences seekers and chains them to dogma. But doubt, when approached with sincerity, is not a sign of failure. It's the path to deeper, more authentic faith. Far from being weakness, it is the crucible where genuine belief is forged. The idea that salvation belongs only to those who follow one specific faith is one of the most damaging myths in human history. Countless traditions claim, only through our path will you reach heaven or enlightenment. This exclusivity has fueled division, discrimination, and even violence. But when we step back, we see that nearly every religion teaches compassion, forgiveness, and love, universal principles that transcend boundaries. The truth is, no single faith owns the key to eternity. Spirituality is a vast ocean, and religions are rivers flowing into it. Limiting salvation to a single tradition is like saying only one river can reach the sea. The myth of exclusivity shrinks divine love into a tribal tool, while the reality is much more expansive. Truth reveals itself in many forms, and the divine is not bound by human-made borders. Many people believe that priests, imams, gurus, or spiritual leaders are above error, chosen by God to represent divine will without flaw. But history tells a different story. Scandals, corruption, and abuses of power show that leaders are as human as anyone else, capable of wisdom, yes, but also weakness and wrongdoing. This myth of infallibility has allowed countless abuses to go unchecked because followers were told never to question authority. True spirituality does not demand blind loyalty, it encourages accountability and humility. Wisdom may flow through leaders, but they remain vessels, not gods. By dismantling the lie of leader infallibility, we reclaim the power to think, discern, and hold authority accountable. A true guide leads others to freedom, not dependence. There's a widespread belief that science and religion are sworn enemies, locked in eternal conflict. Stories of Galileo's trial or Darwin's theory often reinforce this narrative. But in reality, many ancient scholars were both deeply spiritual and highly scientific. The myth of opposition was often created by institutions that feared losing control if knowledge expanded beyond their grip. Science seeks to understand the mechanics of the universe, while spirituality seeks meaning within it. They're not rivals, but complementary lenses. When fused, they reveal a more complete picture of reality. The false dichotomy between science and religion has robbed us of immense progress, while the truth is that curiosity, whether spiritual or scientific, springs from the same human desire to know. Don't question, just believe. This is a mantra echoed across religious traditions, turning obedience into the highest form of devotion. But obedience without discernment can be dangerous. History is full of examples where blind followers committed atrocities, convinced they were serving God. True virtue lies not in surrendering your mind, but in using it wisely. Wisdom traditions teach the value of conscience, personal responsibility, and inner knowing. Blind obedience produces conformity. Conscious engagement produces authentic spirituality. The myth that obedience equals holiness enslaves people to authority, while the truth encourages liberation through conscious choice. Imagine committing a mistake in one lifetime, but suffering torment for eternity. Does that sound just? Yet this is the myth millions believe about hell. The logic crumbles when we compare the scale, a few decades of wrongdoing versus endless suffering. Ancient traditions like Hinduism and Buddhism offered ideas of karma and reincarnation, emphasizing cycles of growth rather than eternal condemnation. Even early Christian thinkers debated whether hell was eternal or temporary. The eternal punishment myth has served more as a fear tactic than a reflection of divine justice. True justice, aligned with compassion, seeks restoration, not unending torment. In some teachings, prosperity is seen as proof of God's blessing, while poverty is viewed as a curse or punishment. This myth is especially strong in the modern prosperity gospel, but wealth often reflects social structures, luck, or exploitation, not necessarily divine favor. If money equaled holiness, then history's most corrupt rulers would be saints. Many prophets and sages lived in simplicity, teaching that true riches are found in wisdom, kindness, and inner peace. The myth of wealth as blessing keeps systems of inequality in place, while the truth reminds us that the divine measures value by love, not bank accounts. For centuries, women were told they were spiritually weaker, less pure, or more sinful than men. Religious texts were often interpreted to justify their exclusion from leadership or sacred roles. Yet, archaeology and history reveal that many ancient spiritual traditions honored the feminine divine and women as priestesses, prophets, and guides. The myth of female inferiority was a later construct, shaped by patriarchal societies seeking control. The truth is that spirit has no gender, and wisdom flows through all equally. Breaking this myth restores balance and honors the sacred feminine alongside the sacred masculine. Many argue that without religion, humans would have no morals, that only sacred texts provide ethical guidance. But morality existed long before organized religion. Ancient tribes developed codes of cooperation and justice to survive. Compassion, fairness, and empathy are part of human nature, not exclusive to any doctrine. In fact, some of the worst atrocities in history were committed by religious groups in the name of God. The myth that morality belongs only to religion gives institutions control over ethics. The truth is that morality is rooted in our shared humanity, guided by conscience and empathy. Ancient scriptures often describe the earth as flat, with a dome above it and waters below. For centuries, people believed this literally, persecuting those who argued otherwise. The myth of sacred cosmology shaped worldviews and limited exploration. Yet, even as science proved otherwise, many clung to literal interpretations of ancient descriptions. The deeper truth is that these cosmologies were symbolic, expressing spiritual ideas in the language of their time. Taking them literally created conflict with discovery, while recognizing their metaphorical nature opens a richer understanding of human imagination and faith. When tragedy strikes, some are told it happened because God willed it. This myth has caused immense pain, making people believe their suffering was divinely ordained. But attributing every disaster or illness to God strips away compassion and responsibility. Ancient wisdom often saw suffering as part of life's natural cycle, a teacher rather than punishment. Many spiritual teachers emphasized that while we can't always control suffering, we can control how we respond to it. The myth that suffering equals divine will keeps people passive, while the truth empowers them to find meaning and resilience in hardship. Throughout history, people believed gods demanded blood, animal or even human, to grant blessings. This myth fueled rituals from the Aztecs to ancient Hebrews. But does the divine really require suffering and death? Or was this a projection of human fear? Sacrificial systems often benefited religious elites who controlled the rituals. The deeper truth is that the divine delights not in blood, but in love, justice, and compassion. The myth of sacrifice kept people trapped in fear, while true spirituality calls for inner transformation, not external slaughter. Across cultures, God is often depicted as a father, king, or lord, exclusively male. This myth has reinforced patriarchal dominance, but divinity transcends gender. In many ancient traditions, the divine was seen as both masculine and feminine, or beyond all categories. Limiting God to a male figure shrinks the infinite into a human construct. The truth is that divine energy expresses itself in balance, masculine and feminine, form and formless. Breaking this myth frees us to experience God not as a man in the sky, but as the boundless source of all being. Many religions teach that revelation ended with their prophet, scripture, or tradition, that nothing new can be added. This myth creates rigidity, silencing fresh insights and mystical experiences. But history shows that revelation has always been ongoing. Mystics, saints, and seekers continue to encounter visions, wisdom, and divine presence. The universe itself is still unfolding, and so is our understanding of the divine. The myth of final revelation freezes faith in the past, while the truth reminds us that the divine is ever living, ever speaking. In many doctrines, loyalty to the institution is praised above kindness or compassion. People are told that defending doctrine is holier than helping neighbors. This myth has justified cruelty in the name of orthodoxy. But what did the greatest teachers emphasize? Love of neighbor, compassion for the weak, justice for the oppressed. The divine does not need defenders of dogma. It needs people who embody love. The myth of loyalty over love distorts spirituality into tribalism, while the truth centers on love as the highest law. Perhaps the deepest myth of all is that God is far away, distant, and separate from humanity. This belief creates dependency, fear, and alienation. But mystics across traditions whisper a different truth, that the divine spark dwells within us. We are not separate, but expressions of the same infinite source. Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God being within. Hindu sages spoke of Atman, the divine self within each being. To believe we are separate is to live in illusion. To awaken to unity is to step into liberation. The myth of separation disempowers us, while the truth restores our dignity as co-creators with the divine. Crosses, rosaries, statues, or sacred objects are often believed to carry automatic, supernatural power. People cling to them for protection or luck, as if the object itself channels divine energy. But in truth, these symbols are only as powerful as the meaning we invest in them. A cross around the neck is not inherently magical. Its impact comes from the faith and intention behind it. The myth of objects possessing inherent holy power has been exploited by institutions selling relics, indulgences, or talismans. Spiritual power doesn't come from owning a symbol, but from the consciousness and devotion it awakens in you. The truth is that symbols are tools, not shortcuts. They remind us of higher realities, but do not replace authentic spiritual practice.